So the next record we're going to talk about are SRV records. And I want to talk about SRV records next because we're going to use them as part of the configuration for the NAPTR records that we're going to see later. So an SRV record, we're just going to talk about how it can be configured and what we're going to do. So in this case, as with most of these things, we're reading them from left to right as a query would come through, but when you're building them, you're going to build them from right to left. You need to have your virtual servers and your pools in place that you can then associate to wide IPs, and then you can use those wide IPs in an SRV pool, and then you can define your wide IP of type SRV. And what you're going to find is in this SRV pool, you're going to define the names. So in this case, SIP01 and SIP02. We'll just take the A record example here. We're not going to mess with, you can have the quad A, but we're just going to talk about single A records here. So you're going to define those as pool members here, and during the configuration, you're also going to add the TTL, the priority, the weight, and the port also. So that's going to be part of this configuration of these pool members, and then the GTM, if minimum response is disabled, is then going to go find the actual IP addresses for these. But that SRV pool is going to have some special configuration items that you're going to add in that are particular to providing this priority, weight, and port. So one other caveat for SRV records, and I ran into this when I was putting this together, is that underscores are actually not allowed by default in the RFC for DNS. So you're most likely with SRV records, you're doing underscore SIP dot underscore UDP and all these underscores to the names. So what you're going to need to do is go into DNS settings and zones, and there's a domain validation item, and you're going to want to set that to allow underscores. Otherwise, you're going to get a failure when you try to enter in that wide IP name or that pool name. You're going to get an error saying that you have invalid characters. And at the bottom there, you can see I put the TMSH command that you can use to set the allow underscore variable or setting. Let's talk about NAPTR records. The reason we looked at SRV records first was that NAPTR records are going to use SRV records and A records as targets, as pool members. So once again, our diagram up at the top is showing how we would configure a NAPTR wide IP and what it takes below it. And we're going to say, once again, when the query comes in, it goes from left to right, but when you're configuring it, you're going from right to left. And this all looks pretty much the same here. Now we have this SRV pool. So this is going to be those SRV, these are going to be those SRV definitions that we saw in when we were configuring the SRV pool that has the priority, weight, and stuff like that. And there's the wide IP SRV that is going to actually be an entry in this NAPTR pool. So NAPTR records can have SRV entries and they can have type A entries. So in this case, we're showing an example that has both of these. And how we know that is the NAPTR or the wide IP name for this is actually example.com, and the question was for a NAPTR record, and it's returning two different answers for example.com. And we look at this flag here, this one has an S and this one has an A. So this one's going to return a SRV record and this one's going to just return an A record. We should get a named answer for that. And if we look down in the additional section, you can see this UDP that was an SRV record pointing to our SIP01.example.com that was then resolved down to this IPv4 address. And then instead of going to an SRV record for this one, we have a type A defined. So we're coming down here, and in this case we had we had a quad A and an A here. So we got an answer for each of those when we went to do the full resolution on this. So you can see that the SRV, you need to have all of your SRVs records defined and all of your quad A and A records defined to start your NAPTR configuration, and then it's putting all of those together all the way down the chain. So let's look, the final record we're going to look at is an MX record. So let's go ahead and look at that. An MX record simply points to A or quad A wide IPs. You're going to define the preference number in there and give it the two different host names. And then we can do quad A or quad A responses for each of those. So the mail, compared to a NAPTR record, the mail records are pretty simple to set up.